coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
Can I ask you about your military service?
Of course.
I've got to ask you, were you a spy? Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guests, gossip and stories from the heart of our studio here in Westminster. My guest this week is former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat, the third of 6 Conservative MPs running to succeed Rishi Sunak as Tory leader, who we hope to interview on Chopper's Political Podcast. Tom is probably the least well known of the candidates, MP for Tunbridge since 2015. He's recently been showing a bit of leg to the right of the party, notably with a suggestion he might take the UK out of the European Convention on Human Rights, but he's firmly in the centre ground of the Tory party. Tom Tugendhat, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
Chopper, it's lovely to see you.
It's
Thanks
great
for
to
having
see
me
you
on.
here in our underground dungeon.
Yeah, in your lair, your bat lair. Yeah, exactly.
You're the least qualified of the 6 to be PM, aren't you?
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
Well, because you're never in cabinet in the full. You're a security minister, but never a full department running job.
Well, I would argue that being in charge of the UK's national security is one of the most important jobs in government. And you're right, I wasn't as prominent as others because I did my job. And my job was to keep the country's secrets and to keep the country safe.
Yes.
And so had you been in the Cobra rooms, if you were in the government's underground lairs instead of your own underground lair, which of course journalists aren't allowed in, you'd have heard me being extremely clear and extremely strident about those areas where our national security absolutely demanded action. And that's what I've been doing. So, whether it's about making sure that we're safe against Chinese infiltration in our economy or Russian infiltration in our politics, I'm afraid, and we've seen that a little bit in the past, or indeed the Iranian state threats that we've seen on our streets. You have not seen me because I'm afraid my job was to keep the secrets, not to share them. But that's exactly what I've been delivering. And that's why in my time as security minister, we arrested and charged more Chinese and Russian agents than in the previous decade, which...
And that was you taking a firm line on those areas.
Well, look, you've got to be clear, right? You've got to be clear because, ministerial life is about making decisions and being clear with those you're working with as to what you expect. And that's why I introduced the National Security Act, the biggest change in security legislation in, I was going to say a generation, actually in several generations, if you look at the Official Secrets Act dating from the 1920s. It's nearly a century old, or just over a century old, actually. Those changes are incredibly important, and that's what I was doing. But as you know, when I was chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee, I was always talking to you then, because that was my job. That was my job. I was there to change public policy. But when I was given the job of keeping our secrets and keeping us safe, it's a different job, and I'm always a believer. Do your job. Do the job you've been asked to do.
When did you decide you want to be PM? You look in the mirror, you're shaving, you go, that's a PM looking back at me.
Chris, look,
I don't think that, you see.
Look, what I've always thought is that we have a responsibility to our country. We have a duty to our country to serve in whatever way is best for the British people. And when I joined the armed forces, I promised to serve Her Late Majesty the Queen, and I served wherever it took me. Actually, it took me to operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. It took me into deepest Helmand. It took me into Kabul, and it took me into various different and very difficult theatres where I had to build teams, work together with people from many different countries, including many different tribes of Afghanistan, as you know. And the same is true in politics. I think that we have something really important to do now. We have to rebuild trust in this country because it has been eroded in so many different ways.
By your own party.
By some of the actions of colleagues and our own party. That's absolutely right. And we've got to make sure we rebuild the Conservative Party so that it actually works for members. You've heard me say this before, Chris, but, we preach conservatism, but too often we practice Stalinism in our party. We're so over-centralised. We need to be empowering members.
Imposing candidates on members.
Right, exactly.
All that kind of thing.
It's completely wrong, right? It's completely wrong. And the other thing we make the mistake, we make the mistake from Matthew Parker Street, as you know, from central office. We make the mistake of thinking this is about MPs. It's not about MPs. No. It's about conservative voices across the UK. It's about councillors. It's about activists. It's about making sure those champions of conservative life across the United Kingdom get the support they need.
The problem was the MPs got rid of Liz Truss, who the members wanted. I mean, let's not relitigate the
Well,
past.
that's not even the first time.
No,
as you know, it's not even the
Boris
first time.
Johnson
And what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that when our members make a decision, we make sure we deliver it.
So will you have an elected chairman? Priti Patel wants one.
Well, it's not just about a single elected chairman, right? It's about making sure members are throughout the entire process. Look, I'm looking at various options, right? And I like the idea of having greater members' representation through the chair of the voluntary party, through the candidates department. There's many different ways of looking at this.
They're on the board of the party, these people. I mean, they're not doing much good there, are they? They're not actually helping get the voice of members in.
Chris, that's exactly why. That's exactly why I'm asking for members to give me their feedback. Because the truth is, you know, you can look at having two poles of power, but, you know, if you think the real problem is we needed more division in the Conservative Party, I don't think I don't think you'd advocate that. What we need to do is we need to think about members' voices throughout. Now, fundamentally, that's about candidate selection. Fundamentally, that's about the Conservative Policy Forum that, you know, has been ignored, let's be honest, you know, too often. Fundamentally, that's about making sure that councillors, MSPs, MSs, AMs are actually properly heard. You know, look at the way the Conservative Party works in London or Manchester. Look at the way it works in Wales or Scotland. In each place, it's got to work in a way that is absolutely appropriate to that community. And, you know, I was in Ynys only the other day talking to members of the Senedd about the way the Conservative Party does, or in fact, actually, let's be honest, doesn't work terribly well with the Welsh Party. And I was just, last night, I was in Glasgow actually talking to some fantastic activists about the way that we need to make sure that we integrate voices across the UK to make sure that we're getting that campaign right, because this is about making sure local voices are heard in communities. We know this, you know this. When you preach from Westminster, it doesn't work. You've got to listen.
There's so much to do. You know, there's only one football club in all the 92 football clubs that play a home game
in a Conservative seat.
Yeah, Bromley in Kent.
Yeah, and of course Tunbridge Angels.
And let's not ignore the Tunbridge Angels. You mentioned your military service. You served in the British Army Reserve. Does that background in the military make you perfect for the role? I mean, we haven't had someone with your level of service, I think, going for this top job for a while.
Well, look, I think it's really important because public service matters, right? And there's various different ways you can be in
Keir
public.
Starmer says that all the time.
Well, to be fair to him, he was a public servant. He just took a rather different emphasis on it than I did, right? You know, and I think that we need to be absolutely clear that those who serve the British public, and whether that's in uniformed services like in medical profession or in the police, that's one way in which we serve. But as we saw in COVID, there's people who serve as key workers in ways that we didn't always think about it. Whether that's in shops or delivery, there are many people across this country who serve our country. And what's important is to make sure you're getting that experience. I'll tell you what I took out of the armed forces, actually. It's not just the leadership skills of the determination, the mission led approach, and of course the listening and the honest listening to a team. It's actually understanding your country. I mean, one of the things I love about GB News is you're speaking to the whole of the British people.
Oh, yes.
Right? You know,
we can't ignore them.
You can't ignore them.
They get cross if we don't.
And they're
Rightly
right.
so.
And they're absolutely right, Chopper. And, you know, and even in your logo, I love the fact that you've got GBNI. And you're
Yes, that's what it could be.
That's what it is.
Yes,
that's the way it's a good piece of design, because what you're actually talking about, GB News,
is the UK.
Is the UK, right?
Correct.
It's the whole of the United Kingdom. And one of the things about the army, and, you know, I spent the best part of, I think it was about 13, 14 years in the Army Reserve. So about 7, 8 years of that was on regular service, so on operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and on service here as the military assistant to the Chief of the Defence Staff, so the principal advisor to the absolute boss.
Yes.
And what you learn there is you learn a lot about your country, because if you're serving alongside Royal Marines, they recruit from the whole of the UK. You're working with people who were recruited in Inverness or in Ireland or in, I mean, just all over the UK.
And rightly so.
Rightly so, absolutely. But you learn about them. You also, of course, learn about their family. So you hear about, because you spend months literally living with people from every different walk of life. And you're working with people. There was a great mate of mine, a really close friend, who was brought up in Lincolnshire, was taken into care very, very early, fled care, as it were, by joining the Royal Marines. That's how he escaped at 16 and a half. And he's now doing incredibly well for himself. He ended up as a sergeant major, and he's now doing very well for himself in business. Now, there is a wonderful example of how the armed forces helped a young man get out of a very difficult situation.
And give order.
Exactly. Gave structure, gave purpose, and got out of it. But it can't just be right.
So that national service idea, you back that one?
Look, it's a great idea that needs work, right? Because what we need to see is this structure behind that, not just the ballpark figures, but we need to find other ways of helping people, and that's why I'm absolutely committed to making sure we support people from across the United Kingdom.
Can I ask you about your military service?
Of course.
I've got to ask you, were you a spy? There were bits you won't talk about. I mean, we're in the deep state here.
We are in the.
No
we're absolutely in the
Bottom's
bunker now.
deep.
We're absolutely in the bunker. Look, I mean, just as when I was security minister, you know there were bits I wouldn't talk about. I was an intelligence officer. I was in the intelligence corps. You know, it's a uniform branch of the army. That's what I declare because that's true.
Yes.
And, you know, I had a job which was to support other units, to support other work. And you'll forgive me, I can't talk about all those bits. You wouldn't expect me to. But as an intelligence corps officer, I had the huge privilege of working with people from across the United Kingdom who really gave everything to our country, and some of whom sadly
you weren't in a special
more.
boat service, were you? There's someone.
I worked alongside many, many different people in many different units.
Can't go into it, yeah. And most important question: do you wear army socks all the time?
I'm afraid I do. Do you know what?
I've got loads of army socks. How many are you wearing them now?
I am wearing them now. Yeah.
Why are you wearing army socks?
Well, because when I
Did
finished,
you buy them on
no,
job lots?
I ended
Your
up.
staff got them.
No, I ended up. You know, a number of years ago, I ended up thinking, I need to go and buy some socks. And I opened up one of my old army boxes. And I found like 60, 70 pairs in there. God knows where they came from. But I found like I'd just been collecting them over 15 years of service.
They're all green.
But every time you went through a mobilisation centre, you know, you get issued with another dozen pairs or something. So I've ended up with just tons. And, you know, if the Queen gave them to me, it's for me to wear.
That's right.
Them,
and they're sort of woolly socks. I mean, even on a hot summer's day.
Do you know they're actually really comfortable?
Yeah, but they are.
You're jealous, I know. I can see.
I want some woolly socks.
Chopper, I'll get you some. Don't worry.
Okay, good. Listen, how many MPs are backing you?
Look, I'm not going to give you numbers. But I'm getting
another secret from Tom Tugendhat.
But look, that's not. As you know, there's a lot of people who are thinking right now about the direction of the party, and they're absolutely right to be. And they're looking at how we're acting. Now, that's why I have been going around the country, and I've been meeting with members and listening. Well, let's be honest, Chris. This is a test. This election race is a test, as all good election races are, and it's a test. Can you organise a national campaign? Can you?
Yeah.
Can you raise the money, and can you raise the support that is needed
You've been in
to
Wales,
run an opposition?
Scotland and elsewhere.
Can you get people out? Can you talk to not just the national media like you, who talks to tens of thousands of people, but can you speak to local media who have different focuses? And you understand this, you know, who have a very different focus, who are talking to their very local readership, to their local listenership, and who want, quite rightly, they want a targeted message about something important. Can you do the morning round in Anglesey? Can you do it? Which I did. Can you do it in Aberdeen? Can you speak to people across the United Kingdom? That's the test.
Connect.
Can you connect? Now, that's what this test is about. And can you build a team? Because, you know, we've had to build a team from nothing, of course, to running a full team.
Well, why is your rival Kemi Bay not on holiday?
Look, she has to make her own decisions. We all have family commitments.
You've got a family too.
I do, and I have a very understanding partner. And Kemi is a really, really good friend of mine, and she has always put her family first, and she's absolutely right too. And I put my family first too. I have nothing but respect for Kemi.
Keir Starmer gets in trouble for saying that. He takes Friday off to observe the Jewish faith, and he's told he's having a part-time...
Well, not from me, he didn't.
Not from you.
To be fair, not from me, not from Kemi.
Fair enough.
You know, Kemi is a good friend, and I won't hear a word against her.
Okay, there we go. Well, she'll be on this podcast at some point. It's in the
I'm
future
sure she will, and she'll give
a
very, very good case for herself.
Your
she'll stand on her record.
Your fourth favourite, so you are popular, but you're popular amongst the wider public. So how do you get through the MPs? I guess, is it the case that there's a moderate parliamentary party amongst 120 or so Tory MPs, but then you've got this more of a right-wing base? Is
Chris,
that wrong? I mean,
Chris, it is not like
I do.
It is not like you to use the language of socialists, right? That's not who you are. I know you're not. So look, let's stop with this sort of left-right rubbish. That's what the socialists say. I'm a conservative. Right? I believe in conservative principles. I believe in lower taxes. That's why I didn't support Rishi's rise in national insurance contributions, which you reported on at the time. I believe in personal liberty and personal freedom, and I think some of the restriction on COVID went too far. That's why I voted against the vaccine passports. You know, I am a conservative because I believe that the Conservative Party is the best vehicle for aspiration, hope, growth, prosperity and security that this country has known, not just for the last 20, 30 years, but for 200 years. And let's be honest, all six of us are conservatives, right? What we're talking about here is fundamentally, how do you win the country? Because I don't want to be the shadow minister for anything. I don't want to be the leader of the opposition.
So much unites you, isn't there?
I want to be the Prime Minister, and I want the team around me to be Secretaries of State and Ministers, not shadow anything. Now, there's a lot that unites all of us. There's so much that unites all six of us. Realistically, let's be honest, we agree on so many areas. What this is about is, how do you win the country? And that's why, of course, the polls are right. By the way, of course it's correct that we ask the Conservative Party what they think. because after all, I work for the Conservative Party. You know, I work for the people of Tunbridge and Malling. I work for the British people. I work for the Conservative cause. I work in the Conservative interest. But this is about how do you win, right? How do you win the country? If you only win the Conservative Party, you know this, I know this, you end up with 25, 30% of the vote.
And you voted to Remain. Does that matter with the base or not? Are we all Brexiteers now?
We've all made the decision to respect the will of the British people correctly, because we're all Democrats. And what I've done is, the moment that vote came in, as you know very well, I have always voted to make sure that that decision was executed through law and through Parliament.
What are your plans for your first 100 days as leader? Do you have any?
Well, the first 100 days have got to be to do with reforming the Conservative Party. I mean, look
at the actual party itself,
look
the
at
structures.
Look at the party itself. Look, there's so many things we've got to change. But what we can't do is we can't let Labour off the hook. Just look at what Rachel Reeves has done in the last few months. She literally told us that there was nothing hidden in the government books. And a week later, she's telling us there's this missing money. It's complete rubbish. She has decided to pay off her union paymasters rather than supporting the interests of you, the British people,
pensioners,
patients.
They're making choices here.
They're making choices. Look at the choice they've just made. 22%. Look, I mean, we all respect
junior doctors.
We all respect doctors. I know you do. I do. We all respect the extraordinary medical teams who do so much to care for us. But let's be honest. It's a choice between pay today or investment for tomorrow, and they've chosen to pay off today. Now, you've already seen what's happened. They did the same with ASLEF, and what happened? ASLEF came back. The next day, the train drivers came back the next day and said, here we go, more strikes, right? What do you think you're doing? You're encouraging people to strike.
And pensioners this winter could be very cold at home.
Well, this is what Rachel Reeves has chosen to do, right? Rachel Reeves has chosen to advertise. She literally said it in a speech, that if a strike is too expensive, she'll pay off the strikers. So guess what the strikers are doing? They're saying, well, this strike's going to be even more expensive, so you can pay me off with more. And now where is that money coming from? It's coming from pensioners. It's coming from the winter fuel payment, and it's going to come from your taxes. You bet.
Do you think pensioners might freeze this winter?
Look,
well, I mean, it's been talked about in headlines in newspapers already.
Chris, you live in West London. I live in Kent.
Outside London.
In our communities, you know what? When it gets cold, it gets unpleasant, but normally it's okay. The further north you go, the worse this is. So if you're interested in levelling up, if you care about the union, if you care about the United Kingdom, if you care about pensioners, this is the wrong answer.
That's right. On immigration, how do we finally, once and for all, deal with this issue of big net immigration? And would you like to apologise for seeing those big numbers come through the door?
Look, absolutely. And, you know, we've all got to stand on our record.
Was it wrong then to allow, 1.2 million to arrive in 2 years legally?
No question. Absolutely no question about it. Because what we've got to do is we've got to make sure immigration is at a level that the British people and British society...
And what's your level?
...can integrate. Well, look, I'm interested in the levels that we saw between 1990 and sort of 2010. Then
what is that?
It was about 100,000 roughly, 120. I mean, there isn't an exact number because it's going to depend on what you need to care.
It's tens of thousands, isn't it?
But look, that's the ballpark figure we're looking at, right? That's the sort of area you're thinking of. And the reason you're thinking of that is because this isn't about the generosity of the British people, right? You are going to have emergencies, right? You're going to have emergencies like Ukraine or Hong Kong where you peak.
Yep.
We know that, you know that, I know that. The British people absolutely are unbelievably generous. Just look at what happened when people literally opened their homes when Putin invaded. It's not about absolute numbers. It's about what you're getting, what the return is.
And how would you get to tens of thousands? How do you make that happen?
Well, a lot of that's to do with visas. I mean, a lot of that is frankly to do with visas and decisions.
The numbers are halving, aren't they, already? We're going to see.
Well, they're down to, I think, 200,000-300,000. So, it's still high. Let's not kid ourselves, Chris. This is still high. What we need to be doing is making choices. And I'm afraid this is based on choices that we have made. So we've got to stand on our record. When you made a choice to allow graduate visas, when you made a choice to allow families in, when you made a choice...
That was you making the choice.
Well, it was us. It was us. It was our government. That's right. Exactly right.
And were you fighting that in the Home Office?
I made my voices heard, but one of the things I have always said is I will keep the conversations I had privately around the cabinet table and privately with colleagues private, because you can't have a government, you can't have a team if you've permanently got
that
people...
apology would wipe the slate clean for a lot of the Tory voters, I think, because it has driven voters towards reform, which offer easy solutions like one in, one out.
But Chris, you will forgive me. I mean, I apologise. I mean, and I'm completely clear about it. And the reason I apologise is because we can see the effects, right? We can see the effects in communities across the United Kingdom. But this isn't just about pointing at the problem. It's about fixing it.
Indeed.
And that's why what we really need is a massive economic change, because we need Brits to be taking the jobs that we are talking about. Now, that means changing the way we pay, changing the way we invest, and actually changing the British economy. Because frankly, at the moment, it's not delivering properly for the British people.
Illegal migration. You back Rwanda.
Absolutely.
Would you bring it back?
Look, in 4 years' time, it might be something else, but we need a deterrence.
Also, some form of offshore processing.
Some form of offshore processing.
Okay.
Will it be Rwanda? Could be. Absolutely could be. It might be Albania, like the Italians. It might be something else, like the Spaniards are working on. It might be something that we do with the Danes.
Others are processing. This is deporting. The difference is deporting against processing, as you know, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. Well, there's actually, we're doing both, right? Right. And others are doing, some are doing variants on both, right? So it's not a cut and dry. So the Italians are doing processing in Albania as well as deporting. The Danes are talking about doing both. The Spaniards are talking about different things. So it's making sure we work with others. Could it be Rwanda? Absolutely, it could be. But it could be other things as well. This is in 4 years' time. So we need to make sure that it's appropriate to whatever Labour damage has done by then.
To make it work, you said when you announced your candidature, you said in the Telegraph you wouldn't let a foreign court bully us, which is what Rishi Sunak says about. But would you really? I mean, Tom Tugendhat, you and me talking, no one's listening. Would you pull out of the ECHR? Chris, that's not where your politics. I've known you for years. You're not a
Chris. You've known me for years, and you know that the first thing I did in politics when I left the army in 2013 was write a policy paper that you actually reported on called Fog of Law, which was about...
Fog of Law, that's right.
Exactly right, which was about the ECHR and about the way the ECHR has interfered in operations overseas, leaving commanders in a very difficult position. And I was arguing then what I'm arguing now, which is that we need to pull out of aspects of the ECHR now.
So it's a partial derogation.
Not just a partial derogation, a derogation from certain articles, an opt-out.
Like on prisoner voting.
Well, that's just a straight refusal. Yeah. What I'm talking about is not applying the law, so that you don't get to the point of having to refuse. Right. You actually do not apply the law. Now, by the way, that's what the ECHR sets out. That is one of the options it sets out, and it was Labour who didn't apply it. This was a decision by the Blair government. Now, the French, by the way, French actually opted out of this aspect. So this isn't just me saying it. You can do this. Now, I have been arguing this now for, 11 years that we should be doing this. For 11 years, I've been arguing that we needed to opt out of this. And where we can't opt out, we need to reform. And if we need to leave...
In returns to Rwanda, for example. Yeah.
Rwanda is one aspect. There are actually plenty of other aspects, to be honest, because what we've seen is seen a change of culture. Yes. We've seen a rights-based culture rather than a duties-based culture, and I think that's wrong. What we need to see foreign courts, or foreign agreements, actually, let's be frank, all foreign agreements working for the British people. And that's why I'm pretty clear. When I'm with Jacob, I put it in exactly, I put it in the language that he gets, which is the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. These treaties are made to protect the British people. That's what they're made for.
Make it work for them.
Make it work for the British people.
You mentioned immigration before, and you made quite a well-received speech last week, I think it was last week, or early this month anyway, on law and order.
That's right. It was the first serious speech on the riots. I'm really frustrated that nobody in the government has actually addressed the question.
You talked about you want a leader, not a lawyer. You talked about the Keir. I mean, Keir Starmer did quite well post-riots. He got the system working in the right order.
Eventually.
COVID didn't meet for a week. We know that. But he did get people jailed. I mean, in terms of, I say doing well, I'll explain that. It means that showing that there are consequences for rioting.
Sorry, Chris, you're right, he got there in the end.
Yes.
But he was there in 2011. He was the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2011. And all the lessons were clear. When David Cameron was Prime Minister and he got 16,000 police officers onto the street really quickly and ended those riots incredibly fast, that was the lesson, right? Yes. That was the example. And it looks like Sir Keir has forgotten those lessons.
When he calls it a far right issue, is that a fair? It does
not.
Really annoy GB News viewers and listeners.
Because it's not true. The reason it annoys people is because it's not true. It was a criminal issue. Let's look at some of the people. I listed this in the speech. The number of people who were arrested for rioting, who actually had prior offences, not just one or two, but 15, 20, 30 prior offences for burglary, for arson, for any number of different crimes. This is fundamentally a criminal act that was not stopped early enough. This isn't a political act. Let's not pretend that's a political act. It wasn't. And this isn't, we should never allow this to devalue the absolutely legitimate right of people to talk about migration, to talk about the right numbers of people. Nobody, absolutely.
And that's not a far-right issue.
No, it's not. It is absolutely not. And by the way, I've just been in Scotland yesterday, and I've been in Wales. I've been, across England, and people talk about migration, and they talk about migration because they see change in their communities, and they're talking about justice. And it's not just us, by the way. I know you have many viewers in the Republic of Ireland. I don't know how many emails you get, but if you look at the Irish High Court only a few weeks ago, you see the incidence that this is having in other countries too. This isn't just a British issue. It's not just about the UK.
Do you understand why communities are so angry and cross about what they see as immigration areas where they haven't been rioting? That rioting is not acceptable in any sense, but there's concern about this issue.
Look, the rioting is wrong. There's no question about that. The rioting is wrong, and the first duty of government is to keep the king's peace. Absolutely no question about it. Anybody who riots for any reason at all, I don't care what you claim, if you carry a knife on our streets, if you join a militia, if you start a riot, you go to prison. There's no debate about that. But what's also true is that we haven't seen wage growth. We haven't seen equal policing everywhere. We haven't seen the kind of actions that we need to see. What we've seen is inconsistency. We've seen...
Is that two-tier policing?
No, it's more than that, actually, I'm afraid. It's inconsistency. Two-tier suggests there's a straight choice between one and the other. It's not. It's just inconsistent.
Different forces.
It's different forces doing different things, and even sometimes the same force doing different things in different circumstances. So it's not. Two-tier suggests a level of consistency and a political choice, but that's not what it is.
Just briefly on other areas, on tax, do you think we're being socialised into being a big state economy? Really post-COVID?
Look, that's why I didn't support the rise in national insurance contributions, because, we've got to be a low tax. This is about freedom, right? If you want an efficient country, if you want a country that's growing, that's prosperous, that employs people, that has a future for kids and an opportunity for people to start their lives and start a business.
So you'll be cutting taxes. What levels are you happy with on top rates?
Look, the key thing is we need to bring it down, right? And this is why government is about direction and about stability, so we need to bring things down. That's why 2 years ago I was the only candidate who set out permanent expenses easing, and making sure that you can offset effectively company charges against your future tax base. Now, I'm glad that that's what we've now done. I think that's good and it's important, but we need to be bringing down corporation tax, down personal taxes, and so on. Because unless you're doing that, I'm afraid what you're doing is you're taking more control of people's lives.
The 45p rate would go?
We need to work all this out together. We've got 4 years, I'm afraid, that we've got to do the maths.
Education, programmer schools?
I'm massively pro-choice in schools. Of course, from Kent, I'm massively pro-grammar schools. But also, just look at the A-level results. A couple of weeks ago, look at what happened. The free schools did best, the academies did second best, and the unreformed did third. And now Labour are trying to take away all those changes so that you don't get that choice. We know it's about good discipline. We know it's about teachers having the authority in the classroom, and we know it's about parents' right to choose.
The NHS, how would you get it working properly?
Well, you've got to focus on what works. You're right. You've got to focus on primary care. You've got to focus on that part of the NHS.
It's very patchy, isn't it? That's the problem.
Look, this is the biggest quango in Europe. It's run by people who do not respond directly to the British people. They do not have that direct feedback to the democratic will of the British people, and we need to make sure it's much more accountable.
Nigel Farage, why say no to him being part of your party if you run the Tory party?
Look, Nigel is a wonderful journalist on your show, and he's a brilliant commentator. He's made his own positions very clear, but he's somebody who's really good at pointing at problems. Our job is to fix them. And as leader of the Conservative Party, I will be fixing these problems. That's why I'm standing. I'm standing because we need to fix these problems, not just admire them.
Those 4 million voted reform last month. I mean, most of them are Tories. How do you get them back?
Look, let's be absolutely clear. I want people from Reform, from every party to come back, and I want those who stayed at home to come back. I want people who see that a Conservative vision for this country is the right answer to the problems we face to come and vote for us. But in order to do that, it's not about doing some backroom deal with another party. It's about making sure we set out a proper Conservative vision. That's why I'm talking about low taxes, low regulation, and real leadership in this country.
Role for Boris Johnson in the future?
Sorry?
Role for Boris Johnson.
He's amazing.
Who is he?
Sorry, I didn't hear you properly. So he's an amazing communicator. He's one of the best, right? And he's just one of the best. So I don't know what he wants to do in the future, but I'm sure he's going to make his voice heard.
Can your party survive this? Can you win in 2028, 29? The average age of switching from Labour to Tory is 63. Look, according to last month's election.
Look at Labour at the last one, right? They went from their worst to their best in 5 years. We can do better.
We live in different times now.
We
You
do
can
live in
overturn
different
this.
times. These things are much more volatile. And what we need to do is set out a vision for young people, right? And that vision is about choice. It's about control of their own lives. It's about lower taxes, growing businesses, and having a home and a stake in society.
I'm going to ask you 5 yes/no questions, and then it's all over. And did you do repeat some of the issues from earlier? Should net migration be under 100,000 a year?
Well, it should be around that figure. That's the sort of area that
so
it's been
yes,
at.
it should be. Would you ever means test the state pension?
No.
Should the BBC licence fee be scrapped?
Oh, God, it should be much more accountable, shouldn't it? It's. I'm not in favour of scrapping it, but it needs to be much more accountable.
Should the winter fuel payment be restored for pensioners?
Yes.
Should the triple lock continue to be protected?
Yes.
Tom Tugendhat, it's been a great barrage of a conversation with you.
It's lovely to see you again.
Chopper's
Thanks very
Political
much.
Podcast. And thank you to you at home and wherever you are for listening to this podcast this week. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X. Email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed it, Tom Tugendhat has. Please tell your friends. And if you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help other people to find it. Thank you to the brilliant team of GB News colleagues behind this podcast. Mick Booker, Jeff Marsh, Rebecca Nunes, George McMillan, Keith Bays and Tatiana North. And most importantly of all, thank you to you again for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and frankly, who doesn't? Tom Tugendhat does. Catch me during the week on GB News and at midday on Wednesdays on PMQs Live. Keep up to date with all our best political reporting on our website, gbnews.com. But for now, from a very dark and dank...
From the bunker, from the command bunker
of GB News. Cheerio!